Okay, what is happening? We're gonna hopefully help you get out of the bunker a bit better this morning. A couple of things I want to chat with you about in terms of like wedges to use out of the bunker. The important thing that you have to understand about what wedge to use out of the bunker is like, yes, loft, and most of us have somewhere between a 60 and a 54-degree wedge. So loft is important, but out of the bunker, it's not as important as the bounce. And so a good rule of thumb for getting out of like soft sand is more bounce. And what we would consider like a high amount of bounce for a club would be between 10 and 12 degrees. Mid bounce would be say between 7 and 10 degrees, and then a low amount of bounce would be between like 4 and 7 degrees. And if you're wondering what the bounce of the club is, when the club sits vertical or flat, it's the space between the leading edge and where the back edge is touching. That degree there is the degree of bounce. So the more bounce you have, the better it is in softer conditions, because then it can make contact with the grass or sand or whatever it might be that you're hitting out of, and it has a chance to like bounce and glide through that surface, as opposed to if you hit it with the leading edge, this part leaning down, now it's going to dig. And one of the last things we want to do in really soft sand is dig the club into the sand. So that would be the first thing to understand, is out of softer sand, you want a bit more bounce. But if you're playing out of like wet or compact sand, sometimes it's better to have a little bit less bounce. So it's always a good idea to remember that your wedges should vary in bounce. So you should have one that's like mid and maybe one that's high. And then if you're playing in firm conditions, maybe you have one that's low. But your wedges should be built to where you play most of your golf. If you play mainly in soft conditions, go for more bounce. If you play in Arizona and Texas and things where the ground's a little bit firmer, then grab some wedges that have less bounce. Morning, so I'm going to use my 60 degree. It has 8 degrees of bounce, so something with like a little bit less bounce. And the first thing we got to understand about hitting out of the bunker is that we're going to make contact with the sand and not necessarily the golf ball. The sand is what moves the golf ball out of the bunker, so we want to be really good at where we get the club to enter the sand. So what I like to do is I would just draw a line in the sand that looks like so, and I would put it maybe slightly forward in my stance, a little bit closer to my left foot than my right foot. And then the other thing I want to do is I'm going to open up that club face. So before I even grip it, I want to open up the club face and then take my grip. So now it looks something like so, where it's already open. What I don't want to do is manually do that, because now my hands aren't in the best position to hit the golf shot. I need my hands slightly in front of this line that I drew, but the club face open. So when I do that, what it allows me to do is expose the bounce and glide the club through the sand. And all I'm trying to do with this drill is get really good at where the club enters the sand. So in terms of a setup, we'll have this ever so slightly forward. And then from there, I'm going to get my hands pretty low. I'll have a pretty wide stance. The reason we have a wide stance is because we're making a bigger swing. So a little bit wider stance, I'll have my hands a bit lower. And what I like to think about is getting the club to work up and a bit more vertical or steep, a bit more up. And then I'm going to try and keep the face to where if there was sand on this face of the club, it would kind of throw it up over my shoulder. I don't really want a lot of this happening in the bunker. I want to kind of hold the face and have the sand start to go up over my left shoulder. And then I'm just going to focus on trying to hit this line in the sand. Right? And the better you get at controlling where the club enters the sand, the better you get at making consistent contact with where that needs to be in relationship to the golf ball. In terms of executing the shot, like actually getting the ball out of the bunker, what we want to be able to do is control where the club enters the sand. And then it's really important that you swing with enough speed to move the sand out of the bunker. And so a good rule of thumb when you're around a greenside bunker, maybe the green's 5-10 yards away, you want to think about, can you swing fast enough, and can you move the sand far enough to actually move it onto the green? So something that helped my bunker game a lot was understanding that I need to swing fast enough so that the sand's actually going to travel to the green. So when I do that, it kind of keeps me accelerating. It keeps the club moving at a good rate of speed through the hitting area. And the reason most of you struggle with getting out of the bunkers is you're just not confident in swinging with enough speed and having the ball go short. So you end up varying either the length of your swing or the speed of your swing, when in reality, you actually need to swing faster in order to get the ball to come out enough to go on the green, because the sand slows the ball down a ton. So that looks like so. We want to make a bigger swing with some speed. I'm going to try and get the sand to travel all the way to the green, and I'm going to try and make contact with this line. So a short game teacher much better than myself used to say, and still says, that we want to swing fast so the ball comes out slow. So out of the bunker, don't be afraid to add some speed here and try and feel like you're going to be able to move the sand all the way onto the green. That's a really important part to getting the ball out of the bunker and relatively close to your target. You got to swing fast enough to move the sand all the way onto the green. Okay, so here we have it. We put ourselves in a pretty tricky spot where we missed the green a little bit to the left, and it kind of short-sighted us. All that simply means is we don't have a lot of grass or green between us and the pin, so we got to try and get this ball up quickly and get it to stop pretty quickly. My first piece of advice with this would just be don't short-side yourself and don't hit it in the bunker if you can avoid it. So err on the side that has more grass and green between the edge of the green and the hole. As soon as you start going at flags, you end up in bad spots, but we'll see if we can't execute this shot and help you save a few strokes. So again, I have a pretty wide stance. I'm going to drop my hands pretty low, and then I really want to think about the club working vertically, and I'm going to swing fast enough to get the sand to move to the green. Cool, and hopefully all of this stuff put together with some time and practice, and maybe under the guidance of a PGA professional, help you save a few strokes around the green.